What's up, everybody? It's Jeremy here from Ocean Bound, and today I wanted to discuss something that's just been so long overdue, but I had to get it done before the end of 2024. I had to talk about my PPC M1 5-meter wing. My M1 story is just kind of long and like a little weird. It started just over a year ago. I reached out to PPC last December asking if there's any way I could get a demo. And so they ended up offering me a good deal on a wing and I decided to go for it. So this is like my one chance to, buy a wing with those like fancy materials that I usually can't afford. So at the time, I remember I had a V3 strike wing, which was now 6 months old and it had already totally bagged out. So I was really in the need for like a new 5-meter wing like as soon as possible, ASAP. So I was stoked. I paid for it in December and mine would be coming out in their like upcoming third production run, which would be starting like right in the new year. The great thing about waiting is the first 2 production runs had thicker handles. So this third production run and going forward was going to have thinner handles, and Sam just seemed like totally stoked on them. So just awesome. I'm stoked. So January came and went. There were some issues in the production. Now they're gonna ship in March. Shipping got pushed back to April. Shipping got pushed to May. So finally, the thing arrived in June, and my anticipation levels were just like critically high. I was just so stoked. But unfortunately, at that point, I kind of had a full schedule. I had like 2 Cabrina wings to demo. I had a few new Army foils I wanted to try. I was paddling a lot. I had the paddle bug. F1 had sent me an Eagle X and a swing to demo. And then they had a lot more stuff coming in July too. So I had a lot going on. But I just started using the M1 whenever I could. And unfortunately, I was gearing up on like my 4th or 5th session and my strut bladder just like randomly popped before I went on the water. So I'm totally thankful PPC sent me out a new strut bladder ASAP, but that took a couple weeks for it to get here. And by the time I had that new strut bladder, I was kind of like in the middle of my F1 month, and then so by the time I switched it out, it was really near the end of August. So it wasn't until like September that I was able to have like a proper wave session on this thing. But unfortunately, my leading edge popped during that initial session in the whitewater. So I wish I could say I've had a normal experience with the wing, but it's just been like anything but. From the moment I took it out of the box, I've taken notes and I've just been super eager to review it. And so since day one, honestly, I've been really stoked on this wing. The first time you see an M1, you see the Dyneema on the leading edge, and it is striking. The leading edge is on the thin side. They say it's 20% less in diameter, so I'm guessing that's from what their previous wings were. They say the Dyneema is 15 times stronger than steel, and the tear and tensile strength is higher than any other competing fabric. Unfortunately, I popped my leading edge in the first wave session I took it out on, so it's hard to agree with that statement, but in general I have terrible luck with my gear, so it was probably just a fluke that happened. I can't vouch for the Dyneema's stiffness. It does make a great frame for the wing. The ripstop on the canopy was bigger than what I would call like standard. The ripstop's made out of like a different type of material than your typical like Dacron polyester ripstop. From what I can tell, it's called Matrix. North is using Matrix on their Mode Pro, and so I'm not sure if it's the same or not. I've never personally seen a North Mode Pro before in the wild. But from what I can tell, it doesn't absorb water like other ripstops do. F1 coats their wings with a material called like plasma or something like that, and it gives them like added durability and like a resistance to the water. But after a handful of sessions, that coating wears off and your wings tend to absorb more water and weight, and they just feel heavier and more sluggish. I think this particular material that they chose is different as far as water absorption goes. I don't know, maybe it's just a coating, but it feels different. I've only had about 15 sessions with this PPC, so the canopy still can totally break in more. But every other wing I've owned has changed in some like kind of significant way within the first 12 sessions. So this one hasn't. The canopy just doesn't seem to have the same flex and give that other canopies have. I like that. It's very reactive. The wing doesn't flap a ton, but there is some flap in the trailing edge when it's flagged out and higher winds, but they do have battens that are there to kind of dampen that vibration. The different material is definitely heavier, but I'll get to that in a second. I do want to quickly mention that the windows are in a good location. I usually don't use the windows, but I do use these and I think they're pretty decent. So when I took this out of the box, I immediately gripped the handles, as I heard the new handles have like, a smaller feel than the first two production versions. These have a very unique shape that kind of fits the bend of my fingers really nicely. This is the first company that I've seen do this little kind of ridge down the end, but F1's handles are kind of like that, and they came out after this one in the past year. Dual tone units have oval handles, which are cool, but they feel a little big. Cabs are smaller and square. The XPSs are very flat, which aren't really the most comfortable in my hands, so I really like the feel of these. The way that my finger just naturally bends allows me to get a good grip without any extra effort. The Armstrong handles, somehow require more effort for me to hold on because the width is awkward in the creases of my fingers. But these things are just so much more natural, so much more comfortable, and I can hold on longer with them. From my notes, the F1 handles are just slightly smaller in girth than the PPC. The duotones are bigger. The Cabrina is the smallest one yet, but it's squared off. It's just a totally different design. The handle is simple, but the pistol grip on that front corner is great for holding in various grips and controlling when you're on a wave. When it comes to the size or the length of the front handle, it's good, but it's not as long as the duotone handles. My issue with these is I wish they were just 2 or 3 inches longer. You can one-hand this wing, but it's awkward because the wing actually likes to fly kind of flat, so you're constantly trying to kind of give it feedback with your fingers and thumb just, to keep it at the correct angle and to ride one-handed. But yeah, in general, it's better than the F1. It's just not quite as easy as the duotone. The wing feels heavy in the middle, and I assumed that the handles were adding to that weight, but I had to remove the handles when I put that new strut in, and it turns out the things are so light. They're totally hollow. They feel like they weigh nothing. So that was a cool surprise. And the handles creak a lot when you ride. So you kind of get used to that, but it's a little annoying. The first session I had on the water was ultra light, and I got up on foil twice, and honestly I was surprised I can do that. I think it was the rigidity of the canopy that helped kind of make it possible. The next session I had more wind. I went out on a smaller foil. I had a little trouble getting up, but it was more successful than the first sesh. The one thing I learned early on is that the M1 is a little on the heavy side, especially when you're underpowered. So when you stand there and you hold it when there's no wind, you can feel it. Like I can feel it in my arms and shoulders more. When it comes to weight, mine weighs in at 6.8 pounds with the leash, and that's after the repair too. The PPC website says that they weigh 6.35 pounds, but even at 6.35 pounds, it's actually the heaviest wing that I own. But whenever there's like enough wind and it's not super light, it feels very light in hands. Mostly in light wind and little chop, I tend to bury the wingtips a lot when pumping. The wingtips kind of flare out at the ends and they're really prone to catching. I'm sure if you have smaller sizes, you're not gonna have that problem, but stuff like that happens more on bigger sizes. I don't think it's as bad as the V3 strikes were. I still have a 4.5 meter V3 strike and it still happens all the time. It's so annoying. The drift on this is fine. It's heavy, but it's pretty balanced in the way that it likes to fly horizontal. My F1 V3s have a lot of weight in the trailing edge, especially in the middle, which is just terrible for drifting, especially in lighter winds. Whether it's how the weight's distributed or, the design or whatever, this thing likes to drift very horizontally. It also seems to like to swing from side to side a lot when drifting. You'd think it'd be more solid because it's so heavy, but that's just something that I've noticed. Jumping on this thing is awesome. I love jumping on it. I took it out one day with my sinker when it was blowing like crazy and I felt like I was jumping to the moon. So, it's got great pop and lift, but then like the hang time's there too. The upwind is good. It's great actually. I didn't compare it directly with any of my other wings, but I'd say it probably goes better upwind than any of my other wings, so it'd be great for racing. And as I mentioned, it likes to drift flat, so it's really nice for doing tacks. The fact it likes to park nicely on the horizontal, and then you add that pistol grip in the design of the front handle, it just makes it a really nice experience when you bring it up and around and over your head. The power is great, it's grunty, but in a good way, and I've had it out in winds over 30 without any issues. It's awesome in pretty much all conditions. As far as longevity goes, this canopy material seems to be, something that'll last longer without the characteristic stretching that, we see in most normal polyester ripstops. And then you have this Dyneema material on the leading edge, which is obviously stiff. So a friend of mine just bought a used V1 or whatever, and I got to check that out. It's been repaired a couple times, and the repairs seem to be holding fine on the leading edge, even though it was a different material than the Dyneema. I was also wondering how the Dyneema would age, and a friend of mine told me after I opened it would get a ton of creases over time, but upon inspecting this older version, I thought they held up actually pretty well. I tend to see these fancy new materials like D-Lab and Alula as waste money, since canopies just bag out. But if you can get materials that are lighter that won't stretch out the canopy, then I can start to justify the added cost. It does seem like more money to repair. It cost me almost $500 to repair that leading edge that popped. I've said it before, I'm always looking for a wing with decent power and great drift. And I'm getting farther away from jumping, and I'm just really looking for something that's like better suited for wave riding. How does the PPC stack up? It certainly checks a lot of boxes. While I do think it's got decent drift, I wish it was lighter or felt a little lighter in my hands. But maybe the M1X is like the answer for me as far as performance goes, but I personally can't afford wings that are priced that high, so the M1L sounds a little more my style. The PPC M1 is a great all-around wing that excels in almost all categories. The craftsmanship is excellent. With the Dyneema, this thing is just a work of art. It's beautiful. I think it'd be good for both beginners and advanced riders. You can just totally get a lot out of this wing. It's solid. It's built to last longer than most of its competitors. And sure, it's a little heavier than some of the wings out there, but you can't have it all when it comes to performance and material choices. So I think the M1 has a really interesting combination of materials. Its design is really user-friendly, but it's a high performer. It's just a super solid wing that will take you to your next level. So I'm stoked I got to try it. Thanks so much to PPC for letting that happen. Even though the experience was kind of drawn out over a year, I really enjoy that thing. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you'd like to see some more of my videos, you can hit that subscribe button or not. Drop me a comment. Let me know if you've tried a PPC M1 wing. I'd love to know more about the M1 and how it stacks up to the M1X or the M1L. So if you've ridden any of those, I want to hear about it. And with that, I hope all of you are doing well out there. I'll see you soon on the flip, and I wish you all an awesome day. Later.